Hi, everybody. I'm Jenny Levine with OLLI at Duke, Program Coordinator. Thank you so much for joining us for this outstanding presentation. We already got a chance to speak with our speakers, and we're really looking forward to it. This is going to be quite a treat. So I'll introduce the first guest, and our guest will introduce Brendan Slocumb. Maestro William Henry Curry, composer and former resident conductor for the North Carolina Symphony, will be speaking with Brendan Slocumb, author of The Violin Conspiracy. For 20 years, Maestro Curry was the resident conductor and Summerfest artistic director of the North Carolina Symphony. Also a composer, Maestro Curry's works have been played by many of America's finest orchestras. Maestro Curry is currently the music director of the Durham Symphony Orchestra, which he has been since 2009. He's also the first African-American music director of an orchestra in the South. Welcome to you both. Welcome, OLLI members, Maestro Curry.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's a real honor to do this. I love this book, and I'm not saying that. Brendan knows that. The book was a revelation for me in so many ways. I'm in the middle of writing my memoirs. I feel like I don't have to write them anymore, because the important stuff is here and beautifully written. Now, I have to admit something. I have mainly been a nonfiction reader for a great many years. And my friends have chastised me severely about that. I've said, well, you know, I like things that actually happened. I like facts and, you know, dialogue that actually happened. And they said, well, you know, are you for real? You know, so when I read this book, yeah, Shakespeare is fiction, and you learn a lot about human motivation and feelings. And it's just amazing. So believe me, I'm not so stupid. I don't own these books. Look, here's Ulysses. Never opened. Come on now, give it up. Both volumes of Remembrance of Things Past, both got to page 7. And this, I don't, is it about gardening? Somebody tell me. And Moby Dick, I don't know, it's a whale. At least I know that much. But I devoured this in 3 sittings. And it is the quintessential good read, great read. I don't know how to define that, but you know, as I know, it doesn't seem like homework. It just seems like revelation and sheer fun. Brendan Slocumb is the great author of this masterpiece. He was born in Yuba City, California, but he was raised in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He's a conductor, a violinist, and I think you're working now on your 2nd book to be published soon. So we're grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is my honor to be here to speak with you today, Maestro.
My total pleasure. Believe me, thank you. If you could tell us something about your background. I know you're a violinist. What kind of community did you grow up in? That kind of thing.
Sure. I actually started violin through a public school music program at the age of 9. I was very, very lucky. In Fayetteville, we had the Cumberland County Strings program. And in 5th grade, we had the option to learn a stringed instrument. I jumped at that opportunity, not because I was gaga over strings, but because the main focal point, drawing point for me was you got out of class twice a week. And I was there. Yes, absolutely. 2 times a week. Oh, yeah, I'm there. And I found myself enjoying it. My friends were going to do it, but they bailed at the last minute. And when it started, it was so much fun for me. I had a great time, and I continued through junior high school and high school. They didn't have a strings program at my high school, and I had to wait until everyone who was 2-3 years my junior got up to high school. So when I was a senior, everyone in my high school class were sophomores, and which included my sister who played the cello. So you can imagine how much fun that was, going home every day to my sister telling my mom every single thing that I said. Yes, that was awesome. And I continued through college, and I became a music teacher, which is what I currently do. I like to call myself a music teacher who writes. But yeah, that's how I got started, and I am a staunch advocate for any type of public school music program. Arts saves lives, and I'm living proof. And Maestro, you could probably attest to that as well.
Well, briefly, I grew up in an all-Black neighborhood, went to an all-Black elementary school. We were the quintessential underserved community, and I had always wanted to play piano, and it broke my parents' heart that they just could not afford one. Finally, this Jewish gentleman, Eugene Reichenfeld, changed my life by coming in sixth grade and giving us instruments and free lessons. So I'm all about the value of these earth angels that changed our life. Was there any music in your home? Any parents beside you, I know your sister played.
Yeah, it's strange. People ask me that question and they automatically assume that my house was full of classical music all the time. Quite the opposite. We were a very musical family in that my mom was a nurse and she worked the 11 to 7 shift. So we would stay up until 10 o'clock and wake her up at 10, and then she would, go to, but we would listen to the radio. We would listen to Stevie Wonder, to Kansas, to Boston, to Marvin Gaye, to the Temptations, to the Commodores, to Hart, everyone in between. We knew every single pop song on the radio, everything. Never any classical music. So when I started playing the violin, it was a little like, oh, okay, what is going on with this? And my sister and my younger brother, who unfortunately passed away in 2021, they followed my lead, and to this day, my sister still, she knows something about her cello. She played through college, and my younger brother, before he passed away, he was the most amazing, incredible musician I had ever seen.
Wow.
If
Wow.
I had this much of his talent, I would not be writing. I would be playing in a major symphony somewhere. I would. And yeah, that's where it came from. I'm not sure. I think it was just a blessing.
Indeed. And was there a light bulb over the head moment where you decided classical music was meaningful and relevant, even though you were a young African American?
I think that happened for me. I heard when I was in third grade, my music teacher played an excerpt of Mozart 40. And for those of you, everyone knows Mozart 40. You might not know that you know it, but you know it. And the tune, bum ba da dum ba da da dum da da dum da da dum da 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 da. We know that tune. She said, whenever you hear this, you'll always know that this is Mozart. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's a Mozart. And that just changed my life. I thought that was the greatest thing I'd ever heard. And it just stuck with me. And I was like, wow, that is cool. I want more of this. And, back then, because you and I are men of a certain age, back then, classical music would play on the weekends. There were no classical music stations. So on the weekend, I would have my ear to the radio, to the big floor speakers, and sitting on the floor listening to it. And I would just listen for a couple of hours to the classical music, and I heard Dvorak String Quartet number 12, the American quartet.
Yeah.
And I heard that, and I said, this is before any instrument, any violin or anything. I'm going to play that one day. I don't know how, but I'm going to play that. It changed my life just hearing that. And to this day, there is a portrait of Dvorak in my living room, so I get to look at him every day, and he's my favorite composer.
Wow, then you probably know that he spent time in America, in New York, at a music school, and his best friend was Black.
Yep.
One of his composing students. And Dvorak was a very, very introverted guy, but they were like this. And like virtually all Europeans, when they would come up to this country, they would say, why are you treating these people that way? He was free from prejudice. Mentors. I think that when I look back on my life, I see certain people that had to be there, earth angels that changed my life. Who are some of the people that influenced you to keep on keeping on?
There's so many. It started with my one of my teachers, one of my strings teachers. And I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, but when I was in ninth grade, Like I mentioned previously, I was in ninth grade. I was at a junior high, and the kids who were also at the school, they were in seventh grade and they were in orchestra. So I'm the freshman in the class, and everyone else is in seventh grade. And my teacher said to me, her name is Nancy Pierce, and she's recently retired. And I saw her after 30 years when I recently did a book event in Fayetteville, and it was wonderful. And she said to me, you can play all of this stuff on violin, the level of music that we're doing, and you're not going to learn anything, but we need a bass player. Would you be willing to learn to play bass? I said, absolutely. Sure. She taught me how to play bass, and that changed my life. That was the start of it. My high school teacher is the same thing. She would actually come in to school like 4 days a week just to sit with me and listen to me play if I was working on an audition piece or just music to keep me playing. And she's the one that suggested that I audition at UNC Greensboro and major in music education. Had no idea what it was, didn't know what she was talking about. I was like, okay. And she encouraged me. And when I had an incident where I did not have a violin, she found one for me. When my violin was stolen, there's the theft in the book. When my violin was stolen, she told a patron who actually had an old family fiddle that wasn't being played. She told them my situation. They offered to let me use their violin for my college career for 4 years in college. And that's how and once I graduated, I returned the instrument. And that huge mentorship. And the most important mentor who I will always sing her praises, for those of you that have finished reading the book, Dr. Janice Stevens is based on my violin teacher, Dr. Rochelle Vetter Huang. And when I tell you, this woman, she not only did she teach me how to play the violin, she taught me how to teach. She taught me every single thing that I know, and I am forever indebted to her. When I wanted to quit, she encouraged me to keep going. When I thought it was too hard, she said, "You can do this. Let's look at it from a different direction." And she taught me everything that I know, and I'm getting excited and all bent out of shape just talking about her right now, and I apologize for that, but I love her so much. And yeah, mentorship is extremely important.
We all need those people. I say the two God professions are teaching and medicine, because it's one-on-one encouragement and healing powers. I was born in 1954. I was born colored. Then a few years later, the word was Negro. Then a few years later, Negro, no, don't you call me that. It was Black. Then it was African-American. And 2 years ago, the New York Times took away my hyphen. I don't remember voting on any of this, but I grew up, my brother's a cellist in the Cleveland Orchestra. How do two Black kids, lower middle class, become classical music fiends? And again, it's your story, who knows? But when you think of why people gravitate towards certain things, it's a kind of a mystery. You fell in love with classical music before you even played the violin?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I say this, and I'm a very spiritual person. Matter of fact, it's the symbol on my shirt. I think it means life. I think that's what it means. It's some Asian lettering. I'm super spiritual, and I truly, truly believe that just the violin falling into my life was a gift from God. I truly, truly do believe that, and it was a life-saving force. I know I wouldn't be here were it not for the violin and being able to do all of these things. I know it for a fact. And the fact that the classical music came before the instrument did, yeah, that to me is a sign. Yep, it's supposed to happen.
I agree with you. I know very few people that didn't gravitate towards classical music unless they played an instrument or sang in a chorus. I don't know, I've already mentioned it, but I call myself part of the assimilationist generation. The first Black to do this, the first Black to do that. The idea was I was born a month after Brown versus Board of Education. And so every Black parent said, maybe this one will be allowed to join the inner circle. That was the dream. Now, when we get to the mid 60s, late 60s, it's considered to be a sellout to be involved, if you're Black, with classical music. What's wrong with you, brother? My brother was more traumatized by the Black kids in his school than I was. They pretty much left me alone. but he was definitely hurt by it. And tell me how your community friends felt about your being into Beethoven and Tchaikovsky instead of, Motown.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I was totally into. I'm a huge hip hop head, and I was when I was in high school. Not only hip hop, but because of my when I was younger, my siblings and everything, we would listen to everything. So I was able to appreciate and understand all kinds of music, from just everything. And when I was carrying around a violin case, in high school, people just didn't get it because they'd never seen this before. I was the first person in my school to ever play the violin, and I'm sure I was the first person in my school that my classmates ever saw with a violin. So it's not that they were being malicious, they just didn't get it. And it was a case of, why are you doing that? Are you trying to be white? What are you doing? What is that going to do for you? Why do you like this so much? And in retrospect, I think it was just ignorance. People just did not know. They weren't being mean or nasty. They just didn't know. And my answer was always the same: because I love it. I love this. This makes me happy. I love to do it. And that's one of the overarching themes, I think, in the book, and also something that I've it's my philosophy. Do what you love because you love it, and don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't do it. I'm digressing just for a moment. I've got action figures back here, and comic books are on my to be read list because that's what I love. Right. It reminds me of a time when I was happy when I was a kid, and I love it. And my comic book collection, these are all comics just stacked up, and I've got a million of them, and I have tons because I love it. And it's just something that I love to do. And I'm not going to be embarrassed. I'm not going to be ashamed. And I'm not going to let someone tell me, you're way too old to have action figures. You're way too old to like comic. No, I'm not. You're never too old to do anything that you love. And that is my philosophy.
Brilliant. And we're all conformists to a certain degree, but I think our strength came from the sheer love of what we were doing, and we were going to push forward regardless. There's so many details in your book that I've never seen written about the music business. It is a business. I think most people would know that a Stradivarius violin would cost millions of dollars. And when my brother played in the Cleveland Orchestra, after the second year, they said, we'll grant you tenure, which means you can sit there forever. But first, you have to buy, seriously, $1 million cello. And the wife asked me for a loan. he wouldn't. But look, there are no oboes that cost over $5,000. There's no trumpets. And these strings are quite something. I think in your book, Ray is playing what, a violin worth 10 million or 5 million?
$10 million.
Wow. So have you ever held such a beast?
I am an eternal optimist, and I like to say I have not held or played a Stradivarius yet. There is still time. As long as I'm still breathing, there's time for me to do it, and I'm going to make it happen. So if anyone knows anyone with a Strad, hey, I'm a nice guy. I really do know how to play. Here's my bow right here. It's actually sitting on my desk because I was practicing earlier.
Very good. So many elements that I don't think most people know about the business. I think most people know the classical pianist Lang Lang. Mm-hmm. He's probably one of the top 5 most famous pianists now. He came to North Carolina and admitted to our executive director at the time that he practices his showmanship. If you've seen him, he's throwing his hands up in the air, away from the keyboard. He's looking up at the ceiling as if God is there, and trying to inspire him, and all this commotion that has nothing to do with playing the piano. It's the showmanship. And he practices that by videotaping himself. And so I conducted Joshua Bell on his 18th birthday concert, maybe the most famous American violinist. And when I knew him, he was playing like this, and then now
he's Joshua Bell.
Okay, well, he's a great player, but the question will always be: is this essential For instance, there was a great Jascha Heifetz.
Mhm.
Now, if you look at him play, it's a poker face. He doesn't look happy. But in this visual age where something else is expected, what do you think about the element of showmanship?
I think it's a very touchy subject because there's with anything, you can go overboard. You can totally go overboard. And like in the story, when Ray hired Christoph to help him with his showmanship, you know, he really felt that he needed that little extra something. Sure, he's got the $1 million instrument. He's got the, you know, the novelty of being a Black violinist, and you know, he just needs something else. And I think I think if the showmanship is genuine and authentic, it's great, and it really does come through to the audience. Because, you know, music, listening to a concert, if you're going to a concert, sure, you're listening, but it's also, there is a visual aspect. There truly is a visual aspect, not only from the conductor but the players as well. But you know, there does come a point where it is too much, and it's very, very distracting. You know, I play, I'm not going to mention any names. I played with someone who would play every single note, played every note, but I couldn't stand playing next to him because it was all the time. And I'm like, we're playing a whole note. Why are you doing all of this? I don't understand it. Is that necessary? You know, it's not going to make, okay, great. Everybody's looking at you. Congratulations. You got what you wanted. But I mean, I don't know. There comes a, and you can tell as a viewer if it's genuine or if it's just like, okay, you're just kind of doing that for show. And to me, it takes away from the performance.
Right. Bernstein was an exhibitionist.
Oh, yeah.
Publicly and privately. So he just was being true to himself. And other people, you can tell when they're putting on a show.
Yeah.
And of course, in an orchestral concert, the orchestral players are not bobbing and weaving and looking like they're having an orgasm. You know, it's like, but the conductor is expected to, you know, give me something to watch. I want to mention something briefly about my life. I was mentored by Loren Mazel, who saw me conduct when I was 19 and 22. He was the music director, when I knew him, of the Cleveland Orchestra, which was arguably America's greatest orchestra at the time, and music director of the Vienna Opera, which was the greatest opera company at the time. So for him to encourage me, we all need that validation, that exterior validation that does not come from our mommy. So I got that from him. So finally, when I was like 24, he said, you need management, arts management. I'll get you in the door of Harold Shaw, Manhattan arts manager. His famous client at the time was Vladimir Horowitz, the world's greatest living pianist in 1980. So I get into Shaw's office. I've had a rising career. All the jobs I went for, I got just like that. I'm rising. I'm not thinking there's any problems. And Harold Shaw says to me within 2 minutes, I can't do anything with a Black conductor. I look back on that and I say, was I naive? What was I thinking? And it's in your book too, where you're thinking, excuse me, you're me, but I'm not part of that. Am I? Yes, you are. And so you have a beautifully written part of your book. And the phrase is the nigger wake-up call. When all of a sudden you realize, if you hadn't got it before, you're a problem to somebody, and the glass ceiling is for real, and you might not make it. Okay. It's not that he didn't realize that there was racial prejudice in the world. It was baked into every TV show, discussed ad nauseum in the news, marched against, and preached against. So how is it possible? How is it even conceivable that he would somehow believe that racism didn't apply to him, that white people would just ignore his skin? He was dressed in a suit with a nice tie, and he spoke with the same accent as they did. The handshake was firm and his gaze direct. He knew he had a great smile on the rare occasions when he smiled. He wasn't the smartest kid, but he was smarter than most. On that day, he learned two things, and these two things were intertwined in his head and his life. First, He learned he could make money playing in front of an audience, and that he loved playing in front of an audience. His listeners spurred him to play better, to dig deeper inside himself. But the issue would always be, nonetheless, despite all that, the skin color is going to be there in the foreground, background, whatever. I've never read this in a book, but it's just the story of my life, where I had to sometimes bite my lip until it bled to get over this. And the only thing that kept me going truly was my love for music. I would have done all of this for free. It was never the money. Like you, I just loved it. So your wake-up call, if you want to describe that.
Wow, my wake-up call, I think it was the one that really stuck to me. And it was this particular example in the book where Ray was playing at a wedding, and it did not dawn on him until the very last moment what was happening. We were at a wedding, my string quartet, and I was in college. String quartet was playing at a wedding, and we played the last note. We played beautifully. The bride was happy. The mother of the bride was happy. The guests seemed to be happy. The father of the bride shooed us out as quickly as he could. The note hadn't even finished ringing yet, and he was shoving us out the door. We got outside, and he said, "You ruined my daughter's wedding. This is not what I expected." And that was the first time that I had ever truly seen hatred in someone's eyes. And my girlfriend at the time, who would later become my wife, you could just see the tears welling up in her face, and the hatred that this man displayed. I had never ever experienced anything like that, and that stuck with me for decades. It stuck with me for decades, and to this day, I hope that guy has had a change of heart. I truly do. I really hope he has come around and and realize that everything is not that bad. It's not nearly as bad as you think it is, and we're not bad, and I'm not bad, and it wasn't bad, and maybe I made a mistake. I hope that that's the conclusion that he's come to all these years later.
I hope so too. And I worry about this country as our history becomes longer and more complex. White folks could see in 1963 fire hoses being turned on blacks dressed in suits that were just wanting to vote. These people who had fought in World War II, that had lost limbs, were still not allowed to vote in Alabama. But every white person, no matter how lowly and vulgar or whatever, could see, you know what? There's something wrong with that picture. Now, no one is feeling it. I don't know that young black people are feeling it, because it's stuff you learn in a book, and it's one thing to learn something 2 + 2 = 4, but another thing to say. So I think the issue of affirmative action is always in the air, sometimes more than ever. And I think you addressed the question of, sometimes people have said to our face, "You're just here because of affirmative action."
Oh yeah. And it is sad, and I like to, when things like that occur, I've learned, and I have to admit, I have actually learned this. It's not an entire group of people. It's that individual that I hold responsible for whatever it is that they say or they do. When I've auditioned for groups and I've made the group, "Oh, the only reason you're here, you're the only black person here. That's the only reason you made it." Well, actually, it's not. I can actually play the parts. And the reason that I'm sitting in front of you is because I played it better than you did. Maybe you're just upset because I beat you, and this is how you choose to, show your anger. Okay, that's one thing. But, people, I don't know. I can't explain why people do or say things that they do or say. I can just hope that people come around and see that in the dark, we all bleed red. Even in the light, everybody bleeds the same color. So let's moving on. Let's put it to rest and move on.
I think human nature is immutable. I think there will always be scapegoats that various groups glom onto, but it'd be wrong, considering what I've seen in my life, not to be optimistic about this country. Mind you, I saw fire hoses being turned on blacks. Did I ever think I would see a Black president? A little. Did I ever think I would see gay marriage? Hell no. Now the transgender thing is coming up, and people taking sides, but progress is difficult. We're all conformists, like I say, and I do believe I'm hopeful in this post George Floyd era where orchestras and other performing ensembles are changing their repertoire to show, yes, people of color do exist. This past year, absolutely, you could see that. So I feel optimistic, and I think you are too.
100%. Absolutely. I'm an eternal optimist. I'm always going to look for the bright side, always.
Well, I mentioned to you when we met for the first time via phone that I need my heroes. I don't know why this started. Everyone needs heroes. I really need my heroes. And my favorite 20th century hero after Martin Luther King is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who, when he gave his fourth inaugural address, he knew he was dying. And it's worth reading, everyone, because he's the eternal optimist. And he said, look, we do have backslides, but it's always upwards and onwards towards something better. So we don't see that so well in this era, but the old statesmen like George Will and Doris Kearns Goodwin, two people I admire from different sides of the spectrum, they said, hey, look, folks, calm down. We've been through worse before. I mean, look at America's nervous breakdown year in 1968. King was assassinated. Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. Illegal war, race riots. Nixon gets elected. George Wallace does well in the North. So it helps me to be reminded, yeah, these are not sleepy eras, times, but still we can get through this. By the way, I loved your author's note. I sometimes don't read the beginnings of books or the author's note, but I just thought, and it's only about 4 pages, but what a challenge to sum up the book and your life and your mission in 4 pages. And I'd like to read a bit of it. My hope is that Ray's story will inspire all of you, white or Black, Asian or Native American, straight or gay, transgender or cisgender, blonde or dark hair, tall or short, big feet or small, to do what you love. Inspire those around you to do what they love too. It might just pay off. Alone, we are a solitary violin, a lonely flute, a trumpet singing in the dark. Together, we are a symphony. Bravo. Lovely, lovely. To dare to be poetic is a danger because you don't want to seem affected.
Right.
But you have to, in the summation, to dare to be colorful and vivid and poetic. Thank you.
The thing about the last sentence in the book is it's so, to this day, when I was teaching high school, I would always get my students shirts. We're going to represent the orchestra. Yeah, we're a big family. We're an orchestra family. I put that saying, alone we are a lonely violin. I put it on a shirt, and I didn't think much of it at the time. And together we are symphony. I thought nothing of it at the time, and I wrote that, and I actually almost took it out because I thought it was just too much. No, come on. That's just a silly little saying that I put on a shirt 20 years ago. But everyone who I let read it, they were like, oh my gosh, that's great. You should totally, I don't think, it's not going to have any effect. No, I won't do that. But in retrospect, I'm really glad that I did include that. I really am.
It takes some daring to do that. Because you don't want to seem to be superficial or affected. But at the end of it, I love great speaking, whether it's someone I agree with or not. But I love presentation. And when the speech is starting to end, right? I mean, they're coming to a summation, a coda. And that has to be true of a great symphony. A symphony just can't peter off into the distance. You've got to sum up the entire previous 79 minutes.
Yeah.
So what a challenge. What a challenge. I do know we want to have question and answers.
Absolutely. Yes. I really enjoyed listening to both of you. You're clearly passionate about your own subjects and this book. And I have so many questions, and the chat is open. I would like to invite OLLI members, people who are listening and watching out there, to type a question in the chat, and I'll ask it of these fine gentlemen, either of them. And I'll ask I was a librarian. I'm going to ask a book question that I always love to ask, which is, what authors do you love and read and respect and admire? I think I can guess, but I want to hear, other than the comic books, which I know you love too.
I want to hear your guess. No, I really do.
Really? I was
Yeah,
going to make you go first.
No, I want to hear your guess. Let's see how close you are.
So I don't read a lot of mystery. So that's sort of out of my range. I was going to guess Dostoevsky because of the Russian connection.
Oh, interesting. Not even close though.
Okay.
I am a huge mystery guy. I love Agatha Christie. When I was a kid, the first Agatha Christie novel I read cover to cover was Murder on the Orient Express, and I loved it. I was hooked. I am the modern stuff. I am a huge Colson Whitehead fan.
Yes.
I absolutely love how he is unafraid to take you and just grab you and make you a part. It's just it's totally unapologetic and unafraid, and that's the type of writer that I want to be. Yeah, he's one of my inspirations, and I love it. I love it absolutely. Agatha Christie, Colson Whitehead.
All right. I got to see him speak at Duke, and he was wonderful as a mentor as well, because a young student stood up and said, there's all this talk about, am I co-opting another culture? I want to write a Japanese character. And he said, well, you know what I say to that? You write whatever the F you want.
That sounds about right.
That was just wonderfully inspiring. So, so we have one here from Jackson Cooper, who you may know. For both Maestro and Brendan, who are the composers working today that you admire, and why?
Maestro?
Believe it or not, I'm going to give you an answer that may or may not be shocking. As I said earlier, my great hero was Leonard Bernstein, who was the first classical musician to say, guess what? The Beatles are great. As a classical musician, believe me, this is like 1966, when they were still controversial. So his attitude was like Ellington's. If it sounds good, it is good. So the composer I most admire is the most often performed composer right now is John Williams. He's not considered to be a classical composer, but do I think his music is going to survive the test of time? Do I think it's truly great music? Am I a great admirer of him because he can write melodies, romantic, really witty, sometimes melodies? So John Williams for me, and John Adams are two of my favorites.
I am going to go with, and this is probably going to, not for the reasons that you might think, he passed away a few years back. James Horner is one of my favorite composers, and not because of Titanic, not because of Avatar. It's not that stuff. It's his earlier stuff. I mean, there's a 1980s film score, and oh my gosh, okay. Just trust me on this. The score to the movie Crawl is unbelievable. It is unbelievable. And I listened to it today. I listened to it just for inspiration, because it's all, the melodies are fantastic. I'm listening to these string parts and I'm like, geez, what I would not give to be able to sit in that orchestra and play this stuff. It's amazing. I get a chill listen to the soundtrack to Krull, Krull. James Horner. I'm telling you, it's good stuff.
I love that. So reason to watch the movie.
Movie's terrible. If they redid it, it'd be great.
So just listen. Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Question from Jean. Do either of you know what's going to happen with the Tchaikovsky competition this year? Are musicians going to boycott it?
Ooh. As a moral issue, I would think that a lot of the Western musicians would boycott. I can only speak for myself, but think about it. You've been working for years for this particular competition, and if they actually end up having it, like, do you throw that away, all of that hard work? So I get it. If they don't boycott, I totally get it. I think it's up to the individual. I don't think it's going to make them a bad person to say, well, I'm going to Russia and compete. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing for the individual, just based on the amount of work that it takes to prepare for the competition.
Wasn't there an issue about the American Olympians some years ago about a certain, does anyone remember the details of that? Am I right about that? Maybe Jimmy Carter was president and there was some issue.
Yeah.
We can't go there. And but you're right. I mean, people, does anyone understand what it's like to play at your level, to be an Olympic gymnast? Is anyone a ballet dancer? The hours it takes for me to compose a 17-minute piece, how it becomes your child, as important as any of your friends at that moment. So to say no to the Tchaikovsky competition, whoa, I wouldn't judge anyone for going. Let me put it that way. I wouldn't judge anyone.
After seeing how you build that atmosphere in your book, it was very tangible. It was tense and it was exciting and it was amazing. So that leads me to the question from Matt.
That's a great question, by the way.
Oh yeah, good question. How did you develop your writing style?
Trial and error. Get it wrong and then do whatever it takes to fix it. I'm not a writer per se. As a musician, I had this is what I did. 20 years ago, I wrote a science fiction book because I'm a science fiction fan. I love science fiction. I wrote a book and it was the greatest book ever written, ever. To this day, it's the best book. Why I have a stack of rejection letters this high, I will never understand, because that book was phenomenal. But I learned, I had to learn exactly how to write. It's not enough to have a good idea and just to write what you think people want to hear. I needed to learn about, keeping the same perspective throughout the entire book. I had to learn about pacing. I had to learn about the use of imagery. In my head, if I'm writing about music, it makes perfect sense. And if I use technical terms, which I did in the very first draft of Violin Conspiracy, everything was technical. I was talking about the bowings and, they were going to do martelé here and sautier here and, this allegretto, and non-musicians, I have no idea what you're talking about. So it's like, I really need to take it to a place, use the use of imagery. What do I feel when I play? What do I feel when I listen to a piece of music? And that's relatable to everyone. And it made so much more sense on the page. So it was a lot of trial and error. And I really learned, and I'm one of those people who I will let you, if you're willing to read something, I'm going to give it to you to read, because I learned that I'm writing for an audience. This is not necessarily for me. Yes, it's from me, but I'm writing for an audience. And if the audience doesn't get it, or if the audience doesn't like it, then I need to do something different. I think being a musician actually helped me with that, being able to take criticism and critique. If someone says that's not good, I don't break down into a pile of tears and, put my computer away and not write again for 2 years. No, I'm going to, okay, I will take that. Now, what do I need to do to make it better? Thank you. Thank you, all of my teachers who told me how terrible stuff was when I was learning.
That is a good way to get used to criticism.
I'm thinking of this. When I was at the Oberlin Conservatory, it was 1972 to 76. And this was the era of contemporary music that sounded like, and let me tell you, if you wrote a melody, you were not respectable. I mean, you were really drummed out of the pack. So I'm beginning to wonder, what do you have an essay, something you've written that I would call the Cinderella piece? Every composer seems to have a piece that, oh, this is my baby, and no one likes it except them. But she's beautiful. No, it's awful. Have you had an experience like that?
Yeah, it's called the book that I wrote called Grounded, that I hope no one ever reads, ever. If you see my name on a book called Grounded, just know that was a joke. Yeah, I'm going to rewrite it one of these days. Once I move over into, I'm totally going to rewrite it now that it took me 20 years to learn how to write. So yeah, that's the one. And I just, I'm glad that someone was honest with me about that book, because oh, who knows? Yeah.
First draft.
As a performer, we are doing this just not for ourselves.
Right.
There are people in academia that are not writing for an audience per se. from applause and what doesn't get applause. Verdi said to young opera composers, keep one eye on the public and the other eye on your art. So I think it's a good thing to be a commercial artist, to care what the audience thinks. But we know that to devolve into just an entertainer and just to go for the pizzazz and glitz, that's a problem too. But this is a public art. And so you have to be aware that, do we want to impress? Do we want to move people or not?
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Time check. We've got about 15 more minutes and several more questions here. I'm going to get to, let's see. Jenny asks about auditions. Are auditions for musicians now done with the person auditioning behind a curtain to help offset bias? Do you feel like opportunities in the classical world are still tightly controlled by the white world?
Maestro, that's all you.
Well, yes, there are behind the curtain auditions, and the women are told if they have high heels on to take them off so we don't hear the pitter patter of high-heeled feet. And look, I've never seen a bias against a person of color or a female in my 50-year career. Neither have I heard directly about things like that. The only time I saw some bias is when I was the interim music director of the New Orleans Philharmonic, and I was interviewing bass players, the double bass. And I had one vote, but there was a group of bass players that had a combined total of 2 votes. So I said, this is the best player. And they said, no, he wouldn't fit in. He wouldn't fit in. So someone else was hired. I later found out, yeah, that person wouldn't have fit in because he was so much better than the rest of the section. But it's different. Look, the orchestra world is, as far as I know, absolutely equal. If you are a person of color and you don't get the job, there's a tendency to have a chip on your shoulder and say, they didn't give it to me because it's black. Or if you're a woman, you see what they did. But I haven't seen that. Now, that's the orchestra world. As a conductor, you're a public figure. You're the image of the institution. And so I won't go into the 45-minute grievance hour only because we don't have 45 minutes. But I've been told twice, we didn't hire you because a black man as music director, black period, would hurt fundraising. This is not minority paranoia. This is not, BS. You are not going to be hired. New Orleans Symphony and the Mississippi Symphony in Jackson. The board voted against you because we need the private donations, not corporate donations. We need private. And so for me to be there is dirty. So how does one keep from being bitter? I don't. I am bitter. I've earned it. But rather than to destroy myself, I'm learning from Goethe. Try to be useful. Try to be useful and make the world a better place. And as you said, Brendan, love what you love. And God will help you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that, your honesty. Brendan, do you want to speak to that at all before we go to the next?
I think Maestro said it all. Enough said.
Okay.
Mic drop moment right there.
That's pretty, accurate. So Cheryl is asking, I heard you speak before and was interested in the debate about what race Nicole is. I had assumed she was white when I read your book.
All right. So with Nicole, and I did this intentionally. I left her race ambiguous intentionally. I wanted readers to at the end of it realize that, wait a minute, maybe I'm putting my own biases on her. Why do I think she's black? Why do I think she's white? Someone asked me that question last week and they said, I thought she was Asian because she played a stringed instrument. I'm like, wow, that's, it's really interesting. And I totally left it ambiguous for that reason, because I want people to say, do I think she's white because she plays an instrument? Do I think she's black because she's dating a Black man? What is it that I put onto people that, gives them, validity? What is it that I do? So I really wanted people just to, think about that. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just what it is. And now that I realize, okay, maybe I won't do that. Maybe I'll look at myself a bit closer before I, begin to make assumptions. So Nicole's race is in the ether. It's whatever she is.
What an interesting experiment.
Yeah.
I really like that.
And
Okay.
there's one detail I loved. Their first meeting where I think Ray has just played a concerto,
Mhm.
and she starts the conversation, little eye contact, and she says, "You're cute." Now I'm thinking this. Yeah, everyone likes William Henry Curry and respects William Henry Curry. Yeah, right. But how about Bill Curry? Come on now, Bill Curry. I saw a letter several years ago, unforgettable. Beethoven, of course, never married. Tragic life with a deafness, but he was dating a woman, and when it came time to seal the deal or home run, whatever you kids call it, to consummate the relationship, she balked at that and left him. She wrote a friend about Beethoven. She said, he is an even greater person than he is a composer. And all I could think about that was, I hope to God she told him that, because he needed to hear that.
Mhm.
He knew he was a great composer. So when Ray gets a little bit of like validation, exterior validation, who's not a sucker for that? And then the betrayal, I hope that wasn't duplicated in your life, but we've all can identify with, who was this person that said they loved me?
Yeah.
Why would they do that?
Yeah, the only aspect that was a duplication from my life was the fact that I was super naive. Someone actually said, I kind of like you. I'm like, well, why would you like me? Well, you're kind of cute. What? Me? What? Really? Okay. I mean, to this day, I'm just, okay, moving on. Sorry.
No, this is it. It's all coming out now. Maestro Curry has laid it bare, and we're seeing inside his
Thank you,
soul.
Maestro. Thank you.
So
You're
it's
cute. You're all cute.
very okay. You mentioned betrayal. Carmen asks, I loved the book, but why did you make the mother character such a negative person, never rejoicing in her son's accomplishments? It's infuriating, right?
One reason I did that for the mom is because I love writing family dynamics. And in my next book, Symphony of Secrets, which is out April 18th. So if you haven't bought it, pre-order it yet, please pre-order it. Symphony of Secrets, April 18th. There's another section with family dynamics. And I wrote mom's character that way because everyone can identify with some sense of family dysfunction. Everyone. If there is no family dysfunction in your life, you are not alive. There is something wrong with you if you don't have some semblance of dysfunction. And in mom's case, was she just, we don't know all of mom's backstory. And I might actually explore that in a subsequent book, but we don't know what was going on with her. And could it be that she was just a nasty, greedy person, or was that the only way she knew how to protect Ray? She'd never seen anyone be successful who looked like him, and she was trying to be as discouraging as she could to keep him from getting hurt. It could have been that. Again, I leave it up to the reader, but I love doing family stuff, like the family drama. I love it. I absolutely love it because we can all identify with it.
I've always said there's no such thing as a normal family.
None.
It just isn't.
Never.
Nowhere. So Terry was asking about Symphony of Secrets. Is there anything you want to tell us, share about it?
I can tell you, I Symphony of Secrets comes out April 18th, and I am incredibly excited for this book. And just an elevator pitch for this book. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? I actually have it right here.
You
I
have
have
it
the
right
art.
here.
I got, this is just the art. This is not the real cover for it, but And this is what's written on the back. In present-day New York City, Bern Hendricks has just received the call of a lifetime to authenticate the long-lost musical masterpiece of Frederick Delaney, arguably the greatest and most prolific composer since Beethoven. Bern thought he knew everything there was to know about the man and his music, but soon discovers that the truth behind the masterpieces and behind Frederick Delaney himself is far more complicated than he ever could have imagined. And in Jazz Age Manhattan, Josephine Reed meets the struggling musician Freddie Delaney. Josephine is living on the streets, sneaking into jazz clubs and composing music in every genre, from jazz to classical to danceable show tunes. She's a natural, and Freddie convinces her to work with him. With Josephine as his silent partner, Delaney's career takes off. But who's the real genius here? In present day, Bern teams up with tech-savvy Ebony Washington, and the two uncover clues that indicate Delaney may have had help composing his most successful works. Armed with more questions than answers and caught in the crosshairs of a powerful organization determined to keep its secret hidden, Bern and Ebony will move heaven and earth in their dogged quest to uncover Josephine's legacy and right history's wrongs. I am so incredibly excited about that book, and I got to tell you, when I finished writing Symphony of Secrets, this is what, March? I finished writing it in April of last year, and I absolutely hated it. I hated every word. I was so disappointed because it's nothing like the Violin Conspiracy, and I thought that I was letting everyone down when I turned that manuscript in. I read it again 6 months later, and I was like, who wrote this? Was this me? Oh my gosh, I love this book. I love it. I can't wait for people to read it. So I'm terribly excited for people. Now, I'm not going to use the word terrible, but I'm incredibly excited for you guys to pick up Symphony of Secrets. It's a great story. You know, there's more of that whole family dynamic that I was talking about, and it's a great read. And I hope, and it also represents neurodivergent people very, very well. And you know, that was something that I really wanted to do. I have a nephew who lives with autism. My best friend's brother lives with autism, and I wanted to showcase that in a positive light. So I think it's a great story, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
Wonderful. I look forward to read it. I think OLLI is going to single-handedly spike sales
Nice.
for that. So
Awesome.
we'll take
I love the
responsibility.
revelation,
Pre-order.
Brendan, about you said, oh my gosh, I messed up. This is not good. And then you saw it with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, I can identify with that totally. And I'm reminded of Tchaikovsky,
Yeah.
who was embarrassed by the 1812 overture, that Swan Lake was a failure,
Yeah.
that his Fifth Symphony was reprehensible. And so we can't be objective about these things. But again, we need earth angels and encouragers to say, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
No, I liked it. I'm sincere. I liked it. So good for you. Can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
We have a couple minutes left, and we've got time for one more question, and it is a doozy, but I'd like to get to it. I think it's important. Brendan, in VC, Violin Conspiracy, I was gravely troubled by great-great-grandfather's letter saved by Grandma Nora. Was the violence against slaves historically accurate?
Okay, so that is chapter 33, and that is a personal triumph for me. One, because it actually got published. I thought that it was going to be a fight to keep that in because it was so brutal. And believe it or not, I actually toned it down. What ended up in the Violin Conspiracy is a toned down version. And this is how I grew up. I'm not going to put anything on anyone. When I was in school, we got America had slaves, Black people picked cotton, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and that was it. We didn't know anything about the brutality that slaves had to endure, and how the resilience of Black people is, you know, to this day, it is 100% accurate. It is 100% accurate. And I know it was very difficult for some people to get through. And I applaud you for reading through it and pushing and powering through it. But things like this, they really happened, and people need to know this is not fiction. This really happened. And this is what life was like. It was a brutal existence. So, you know, when Ray's resilience, that came from somewhere. His desire to want to do well and to succeed, it came from somewhere, you know, and it was, all of it was based in our history that sometimes people want to cover up and hide because it's hurtful. we can't learn to be better until we know what it is that we've been through. We've got to acknowledge that. And it starts with an acknowledgement. So yes, that was, again, I applaud you guys for getting through that section. And it was definitely historically accurate. And keep in mind, that was the toned down version.
Absolutely. I appreciate that your motivation and your sharing it in the book. Any final thoughts, words, things that have come to mind during this delightful conversation?
Oh my God, are we done already? That sucks.
Coda?
If I may just say,
Yeah, of
first, I
course.
would like to thank everyone for your support for the Violin Conspiracy, and for me, it means everything. Thank you, thank you. I cannot say it enough. And just to show that I'm being sincere, I got "thank you" tattooed on
I
my
love it.
forearm. Just
Wow.
to show my gratitude every single day. I am so grateful to everyone and everything for everything that I've gotten in terms of support for this book. And, thank you guys. That's all I can say is thank you. And Maestro, thank you so much for sharing your stories and inspiring me and just everything. And Jenny and Bettina, thank you guys so much for doing this and having me here today. And I love everyone. Follow me on Instagram, Brendan Slocumb, and not to be confused with my nephew, Brendan Slocumb 22. I'm the better looking one. And thank you. That's all I can say is thank you. Thank you guys so much.
And Maestro Curry is conducting on April 23rd, 3 p.m. at Hayti.
Oh.
So that was a little PR shout out, and lots of thanks coming in the chat. Sorry, Maestro
Appreciate
Curry,
that.
go ahead.
Brendan, thank you for the revelation of fiction. Now, tonight, I'm beginning remembrance of things past.
Oh, wow.
I have seen the light. Thank you. Love you. And I can't wait to read the next book.
Thank you all both so much. So much.
you,
Thank you.
Thank you all.
You
Appreciate
all.
it.
You all.